Who wants money? Who wants money and is in New York? Not like right now, like your company's actually in New York. Who wants money and hasn't raised $750,000 yet? Good, you can all pitch me. Charlie at brooklynbridgeventures.com. But if you can't find me on the internet, I probably don't want you to pitch me. It's kind of a low bar. I'm here to talk about when your startup actually started versus the day you incorporated and how much that has to do with your potential success on a pitch. I think one thing that is consistent among a lot of the teams that pitch me is that in reality, they've been working on their startup for quite a long time. What's really interesting to me, being an entrepreneur myself, and I actually feel much more like an entrepreneur these days than a VC. I went for most of the past year without much of a salary. I have a great credit rating now and lots of points. I could fly just about anywhere that American Airlines goes. But people have said to me, wow, you announced your fund in January of last year and you closed on money in September. That's so fast. When in reality, I think I've been raising my funds since somewhere around February of 2001. All of the things that I've done to lead up to this moment of starting my business really counted for a ton. And it would have been very difficult for me to start from complete scratch. And I think a lot of times people come in and they pitch their business, say, well, we started working on this last year. Well, you didn't really start working on this last year because you got the idea from somewhere. Or you're the right person to do this because why? Because of what you've been doing over the last couple of years, because of what you've learned. Think about the bet that I'm making on you as an entrepreneur. I'm making a bet on you to be able to make decisions on questions that neither one of us can think of. On questions that you haven't encountered yet. So I need to have some sense that you have a pool of prior experience to draw from, that you have a way of making decisions that I can diligence not just over the course of the 6 months that you've been bootstrapping this, but of course over the course of the last 10 or 20 odd years of your career. And that's really meaningful. And I think when I think about who I've backed and the situations that I've backed, the one thing that really stands out to me is that the entrepreneur was absolutely the right person to do that particular business. And I'll give a couple of examples. It's very hard as an entrepreneur to look at other people who have raised money and to say, well, why did that person get money? My startup is way better than theirs. They only had, 1,000 users and I had 10,000 users, and the mental math and frustration that you go to, like, don't even try it. Don't even try and figure out why other people get money. Because you don't know what it's like in that meeting and you don't know what the pitch was like. And oh, by the way, people in my asset class don't actually make good decisions most of the time. So if you're worried about why did that person get money, it's as if you're assuming that VCs make good decisions. That's not actually the case most of the time. The nice thing is that especially in the early stage, it's very forgiving. We don't have to be 100% right all the time. We can be kind of right some of the time and, occasionally get a little lucky. Twitter, if you're counting, by the way, is up about 75% today in the IPO. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of VCs that turned Twitter down and never in a million years thought that the "What Are You Doing for Breakfast" app would be a public company, a multi-billion-dollar public company at one time. But those are the types of bets that we have to make. So I'll talk about a couple of different pitches and why some of those entrepreneurs got money and to help you think about telling your own sort of personal story and to some extent thinking about what you still have to do, right? Because there could be aspects where you hear these stories and say, you know what? on paper, I'm probably not the right person to run this business. Maybe that means I need a partner. Maybe that needs to build out my team. Or maybe that means I need to learn how to do something that is like clearly not in my background and that would be a very difficult bet for somebody to make on me to be able to do. And that's the thing that's sort of preventing me from getting funding from an entrepreneur. Um, so if I go back when I was at First Round Capital, I spent 2 years at First Round, and the largest deal that I led, we put $1 million into a company that raised $3 million on a PowerPoint. And you think, oh, that's kind of impossible. But it wasn't. And in fact, no investor turned this company down. The entrepreneur literally ran the table. Every single person who said yes, except for one person at the end, that person decided they changed their mind and came back in. Every single investor that this person pitched said yes. And the entrepreneur was Chantel Waterbury from Chloe and Isabel. So now keep in mind that this is a female entrepreneur pitching a jewelry startup to a bunch of dudes. And still, everyone said yes. Because clearly I know about fashion jewelry. She came in, and what she really did well was reverse engineered what the person across the table was in this business for and what they wanted to hear. Right? So the very first thing she said was, "Have you ever heard of Stella and Dot?" No, I've never heard of Stella and Dot. Well, they've gone from 3 to 30 to $110 million of revenue in 3 years. And now I'm totally focused and leaning in, which I'm sure you're used to most VCs being in these meetings all the time. We're always like really, really focused and directed, and our attention is right at you. We're not playing with our phones or iPads or anything else like that. But you lean in on that kind of, wow, okay, so now that's a very interesting business. That's the kind of business that I would like to be in. And she said, well, they're a fashion jewelry business. They're in direct sales, but there's some things that we can improve on. And she said, we're going to target a different group of sellers. We're going to use online more productively. And oh, by the way, I've been in the jewelry business for 15 years. I paid my way through college selling Cutco knives. Anyone here ever bought a Cutco knife? A couple of people, right? They're great. You can cut pennies, and I don't know why you'd ever want to do that, but she was the top-selling salesperson on the West Coast. So now, like, think of the sort of dumb VC brain, the pattern matching brain that's happening here. Like, you're in a space where people make money, and that's very clear. There's an established model for making money doing this. You seem to have the absolute right background to be able to do this. And now my third question, I'm thinking, well, somebody else has already done this. Is it a crowded market? And then the next slide in her deck was, the top 5 companies, all of whom make $100 million in revenue, represent less than 5% of the overall fashion jewelry market. Wow, so you could build another 10 of these things if you really wanted to. And of course, the hard part being, who actually knows how to get fashion jewelry made in China? Like, not very many people. Who actually knows how to run a direct sales business. And I realized the hard thing is finding the entrepreneur who can run that business. So 10, 15 minutes into the meeting, I'm like really, really interested and want to see, I had some questions. Because she is coming in, first-time entrepreneur, a PowerPoint, asking for $3 million. What would you do with $1 million? Can we start off small? And what I really, really appreciated with her was she was willing to answer questions. And I think one of the things that I find most difficult and most troubling along pitches is I like to poke around. I like to kick the tires. I like to ask questions that, somebody comes in and says, well, we're doing this video thing. Well, why does it have to be video? Can it be something else? And you prep and you practice and you get your own message down, and then people's willingness to throw the baby out with the bathwater, people's willingness to consider other alternatives is somewhat limited because you're like, no, this is my thing. I don't know how to run your business. I don't want to take what you're doing and change it. But my job is to sort of like audit your thinking and to say, well, have you considered this other aspect. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And in fact, in this case, I said, well, what would you do with $1 million or 1.5 million? And she did the math and she presented it, and it was ugly. It was a terrible idea. Like running that business on $1 million meant that you went really low on the cash flow, and the jewelry is on consignment. It was a total mess. And I was like, ah, this is ugly at $1 million. Okay, bad idea. You really do need at least 2.5, $3 million to run this business. And that was the pitch I presented to the other partners of the firm. Everybody walked out of that meeting saying, this person is a rocket ship. They're going to make us a lot of money. We introduced them to a whole bunch of other VCs, and literally she ran the table. The business is doing terrifically well. One of the reasons why I started up my own firm is because I wasn't a partner. I didn't actually have economic upside in that. So hooray for making my prior firm lots of money. One of the reasons why I started my own firm was to get economic upside, which you guys all understand, right? You live and die by your own sword, and if this thing works out, you make a bundle of money, as opposed to, you make great decisions working for Chase, and you make Chase a lot of money. So I get it. I'm in the same boat. Um, Earlier this year, I took a pitch. Late last year, 2012, I took a pitch from someone who who I had met before. Um, and networks really matter, especially in New York. There are established networks of really top quality folks in their respective professions. And I think the circle of people that you surround yourself really makes a difference. And what I'm not saying is some insidery, boys club kind of thing. Like that, I don't think we have that here to the extent that maybe like there's a cool club in Silicon Valley that if you came out of Twitter or Google or Facebook, like I feel like New York is a pretty open community, but there are really experienced people and there are some really aspirational people, and who you surround yourself is really meaningful. And that was especially meaningful in the case of a company that I invested in called Tiny Bop. And I met the founder, Raul Gutierrez, in 2010 or 11 at this conference called Brooklyn Beta. And Brooklyn Beta was a design conference that if you were a front-end developer or designer, like super creative, top tier Brooklyn kind of folks that were way better at Illustrator than I could ever be. And it was sold out by the time I got to it. It was a very small conference, 150, 250 people. And I kind of asked my way in. I said, well, do you guys need any help? Which is code for, I kind of really want to get in, but I don't want to sort of march in and say, I'm a VC, you should invite me in, because I don't want to be that guy. And the entrepreneurs were nice enough to say, well, we appreciate your offer. We don't really need anything, but here's the secret link on the side. Don't tell anyone we let you into the conference. And so I got to go, and it was a great group of folks. And they did one of these, talk to the person on your left and talk to the person on your right. And the guy behind me happened to be this guy, Raul, who had come out of a startup trying to figure out his next thing. And I said, how can I be helpful? What can I do? And he said, well, I'll just sort of keep that in mind. I'm just trying to figure things out. And he spent the next 18 months basically downloading every education app off the App Store and user testing it with his kids. He's a 40-something-year-old dad. He's on the curriculum committee of his kid's charter school. He's born in Mexico. His wife is Korean. They speak 3 languages in the house. Like, education's a really, really like core to his DNA. And especially from a global perspective and inspiring curiosity, like even down to the point where you look at the Instagram photos of his kids and they're not sort of typical, entrepreneur VC. Hey, look, my kid's skiing just like me. It's like a little mini me. It's you've seen those pictures, right? It's the kids playing off in the corner with like a cardboard box and like doing their own thing, and he's very observant about like letting them play and being curious and all that sort of stuff, and I appreciate that. And he comes in, he says, well, oh, and a year and a half later he comes back to me and says, by the way, you offered help, and I'm raising a round. So I clearly, yes, I did offer help, so why don't you come in? And he said, well, I've been downloading all these apps and they fall into 3 categories. The big category is suck. The second category is good, but the teams have no idea how to turn this one app into a business, or they have no designs on turning that one app into a business. They're not really, they designed a great kids app, but the next thing could be a microsite for Diet Coke. Like, they don't really care. And the third category is Tokaboka. Like, there's this sweet arm of a Swedish publishing company that builds these amazing apps on the App Store that do like millions of dollars worth of revenue, and they really nailed the very strong brands with parents, and parents trust them. Um, so that's something that he really researched the space, and he knew every player and every app, and he was like a student of the space. And too many times somebody comes in to pitch me, and I said, well, what about these people? What about these people? Oh, I'm not familiar with that. Really? Like, what? You quit your job and you didn't even do like a couple months worth of research on who has come before you and attempted the same exact thing? I'm stunned. And certainly you're asking me to bet on you, and I thought of two of these. And if you didn't know them, like, I'm sure there are 10 others. Like, you should be telling me about all the prior mistakes that were made. Um, and so he said, well, I'm, going to build this series of apps that are incredibly well designed, and they inspire kids and curiosity and all this sort of stuff. And so, first of all, to go back to that model, you know, telling me about Tokaboka and telling me about the market. So, there is a model of success in this space that prints enough money to make a VC interested in. Two, a very strong sense of what he needed to do to build a business that resonated with his customer, right? So it wasn't like, hey, we launched and we got 10,000 users. This is what we're going to do over the next couple of years, and to create value. And let me tell you about how my customer thinks. And, parents love to buy things for their kids that make their kids smarter, because one day their kids will, create a big company and it'll go public and they'll be able to retire. And so, that's what you want to inspire your kid to do. Um, and oh, by the way, I'm clearly the right guy to do this, because he comes from a network where he worked out of Studio Mates, which Tina Eisenberg is this design blogger. She writes a blog called Swiss Miss, and she has a co-working space that you can't get into from the outside. There's no like click a button for $500 a month and sit at a desk. Like, this is people that she's personally vetted. And it is an incredible network of some of the most creative folks. And for him to be in that network meant a lot. So that meant that his story of, I'm going to hire some illustrators and I'm going to hire an iOS developer to build this app that you haven't seen yet and you haven't seen pictures of, actually was credible. Versus if two hedge fund people come in and say, hey, our kids love apps. Like, you don't even know who the designers are that you would hire to build this, let alone they probably wouldn't work for you. So that story is not as credible as when somebody like Raul comes in and says, like, we already know who the people are and they know us, and they're dying to work with us to build this thing. We tried to raise $1 million. He actually didn't finish the race. At the point he got up to like 750 or something, and just said, like, I don't think anybody else is betting on us at this point. We're just going to go and like build the thing. We'll worry about the other 250 later. So it was a round that lots of other VCs could have gotten into, and a lot of other people passed. And it would have been a legit pass because he didn't have anything, but he was absolutely the person to build that. So when you think about the pitch, and I don't want to take up too much time, and I'm happy to answer a question or two. I don't know if that's cool.
Cool.
Okay, it's cool. Think about it from my perspective. Could I imagine a team better than you? I'm sure that you're just as nice. You're an absolutely lovely person. But in terms of appropriateness to do this model, if I could imagine a team better than you to do this, frankly, there probably is a team that is better than you out trying to do it. And even though you swear to me that no one else is doing it, I did take a pitch with them last week. They just haven't launched yet. Um, and if I can imagine that, then you better have proven it with traction, right? So you either, are a sort of blank check team that, like, clearly you're the absolutely right person to do this, or show me something that kind of amazes me. And in a space that is big enough where even if you win, you can make some money doing it. And that's another thing that people, they play in spaces where, great, so you become the best one of those and you can maybe make 200 grand a year. Like, there's just not enough money in that space. And what do I mean by traction? The bar for traction is kind of unfair, right? Because think about my math. I see 2,000 things in a year. I do 8 to 10 of them, right? So the 8 to 10 have done things that would be unfair for me to ask of most of you, except that they did it. And they're the ones setting the bar for you to get an investment. So that impossible to get into big corporate mechanism that like never ever does trials with anyone, 8 people have gotten those. So what can you do to get them? And sometimes it's just a function of thinking big enough, knocking on the door and say, we have something awesome. You need to work with us.